Hi gang, this is Eric White with the next installment in this screencast series on Recursive Pure Functional Transforms of XML. Today we're going to talk about transforming attributes. Now, many of you will be able to simply infer how you would go about transforming attributes. If you've been following along up to this point, you can see that transforming attributes is not very different from any of the other transforms that we've been talking about, but let's run through it. It's easy enough to run through and talk about. I'm going to create a little document. I'll call it test.docx. I'll open it up. I'm going to insert some random text. I'll insert 2 paragraphs, each with 1 sentence in them. And then one thing that I'll do is I'll style that as heading 1. I'll style this as emphasis, so it has a character style on it. And then I'll come up here and I'm going to add the quote character style there. And let's go look at that markup and I'll show you what we're going to accomplish in the transform that we're going to write today. Let's look at it in the Visual Studio 2010 OpenXML Package Editor Power Tool. Let's look at the main document body part. And one of the things that we can see in this markup is we have all of these RSID attributes. There are these RSID attributes on the paragraph. There's also an RSID attribute on the run, on the next paragraph, and so on. These RSID attributes are there for a particular scenario where you have a single source document and you are sending this document to 2 different people. Each one of those people makes changes in this document and sends it back to you, and they may not have turned on track changes. In that scenario, as each user edits the document, Word puts these RSID attributes at various places in the markup. And if we were to look over in the settings part, we would see a listing of those RSID attributes, and these listings indicate the order that those changes were made. Anyway, this is all a bunch of information that makes it possible for Word to reassemble a document from 2 documents that have been modified by 2 separate people. Well, in many transforms, we don't care about that. We're doing a transform on a document. We're not in that scenario, and having those RSID attributes around really clutters up the markup and makes it harder to see what's going on in all of the markup. So let's write a little transform to remove those. Here I have a little console application, a Windows console application. I've already added my references to documentformat.openxml assembly and to the Windows base assembly. If you've written very many OpenXML programs, you are certainly familiar with adding those references to your application. Other than that, I haven't made any changes to this example program. So let's go ahead and do what we need to do here. First thing we need to do is we need to put our using for the OpenXML SDK. Another thing that I always do, I always need these pt OpenXML util.cs and ptutil.cs modules. Those help me do what I need to do. These are part of Power Tools for OpenXML and just provide some useful functionality for me. So I'm going to add those 2 modules to my project. And then I'm also going to add my using for OpenXML Power Tools in there. Now let's open up the document for read write and write our transform. If we put in the true, that means we've opened it for read write. Now I'm going to get the X document out of there. I need to have linked XML included. And now I'm going to call the transform. Now we've written all the code that we need to put into our main method. Let's write our transform. I'll just right click on here and I'll tell it that I want to generate a method stub. Make a couple of modifications. I'm going to change this to object, and in the very next screencast in this series, I'm going to explain why we like this transform method to return object as opposed to some other type of type. I'm also going to change this so it takes an X node, and I'll call it node. If you've been following along, this code is probably now very familiar to you. We need to write our identity transform. So now we've got our identity transform. This identity transform will make no modifications to our document as this transform currently exists. But all we need to do here is we just need to add a where statement. I'll make this a statement lambda so it's easier to write this where statement. I'm going to drag our document back over here again so it's easier to look at. So we need this RSIDR element. So I'm going to say where a.name is not equal to w.rsidr, and a.name is not equal to w.rsidr default, and we need to get this rsidp. And we need this rsid rpr. And I think that got them all. So now I've calculated that B. We just need to return B. And we've written our transform here. That the only difference in this transform is that when we move the attributes from the source element into our newly cloned element, we simply filter out all those attributes we don't want. Let's go ahead and run this. And it runs very quickly, and it tells us that test.docx has changed outside the editor. Do we wish to reload it? And we do. And there they are all gone. We have much cleaner markup to work with. Well, that was pretty easy. You can certainly do things like refactor out that filter into another method as appropriate if you want to reuse that particular functionality. But it's pretty easy to transform attributes, change values, insert attributes, and so on. In the next screencast, I'm going to examine this interesting question, which is, why do these transform methods return object as opposed to either xnode or xobject or one of the more strongly typed objects that are part of the linked XML API? So until next time, see you later. Come back often to openxmldeveloper.org, and you can follow me on Twitter at EricWhiteDev, and you can follow OpenXML on Twitter at OpenXMLDev.